Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an accomplished professional, a well-known and respected author from Finland, Laurel Colless. Laurel, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much, Ashutosh. And
Thank
actually, I have to just jump in and say I'm living in Finland, but I'm a New Zealand Australian
you.
by
Okay.
nationality and birth. Yeah.
Thank you. Laurel, as I mentioned, is an author, and all of you know I'm very, very partial to authors. She's a tech, sustainability, and education writer. She also focuses a lot on kids' science fantasy. So, Laurel, you've had an incredibly diverse career from environmental journalism to children's fiction. Tell me a little bit about your journey and what sparked your transition back into writing.
Okay, well, the easiest place to start is my education. So in my 20s, actually, I was educated as a literary comparatist.
Hmm.
So it's not so strange that I would be circling back now to writing. However, we are 30 years on. So I did actually in New Zealand, at the University of New Zealand, I spent 4 years studying literature. I actually delved deep into medieval poetry and mythology. I studied Greek mythology. And then, like many New Zealanders, the day that I handed in my thesis, I jumped on a plane and flew to Europe
Mm-hmm.
and kind of left it all behind me and started having adventures in the Northern Hemisphere. And I ended up going circling around into business. I ended up in Japan for 12 years, joined a large corporation, Mitsubishi, worked in technologies, and then eventually into an investment bank, which was not planned. I'm not a numerate person, but I was working in editorial and working with analysts in looking at telling stories about balance sheets, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So still working with writing. And then I met a Finn who took me north and ended up at Nokia for 8 years. So really during the boom time of mobile technologies where we saw really extreme growth from 2000 uh, and finally to the US where I worked in technology at Virginia Tech, but again, still somehow working with communications and storytelling and sustainability reporting. So I got very interested in climate change in Japan, where the Kyoto conference was going on in the 90s when I was living there. And I thought, hey, this is fantastic. All the countries of the world came together and we solved climate change. So it
Amazing.
was a
Yes,
very exciting time. And that was the
absolutely.
what is now known as COP3.
Mm.
And I think we've just finished COP29. So absolutely, we have not solved climate change.
Great.
We don't even seem to be getting any closer.
Absolutely.
Doing a lot of talking, which is important as well, but
Yeah,
and a lot of goal setting. Yeah, so
absolutely.
that's kind of so now,
Fascinating.
I got disillusioned with the adult world and I've circled back and I'm focusing on kids. That
Hmm.
was a longer answer to your short
No, no, I
question.
think you've covered a lot of very interesting thoughts, but let's jump straight into your current passion of your being a science fantasy author for children and a tech sustainability and education writer. Let me start by asking you, what was the inspiration behind the Peter Blue Science Fantasy series?
Well, actually, it sort of began where I just left off with the last answer, which
Yeah.
is that I got so disillusioned working with the grown-ups, the adults in the room, including myself. It's very hard for adults to put aside their short-term needs. We've got so many day-to-day stresses. We can't always be thinking about saving the world.
Correct.
But I was working in Washington, D.C. with a very specific cross-sector partnership where people who signed up were supposed to be, taking very strong measures on energy efficiency in this case to
Mhm.
address climate change. And people were so slow, they didn't follow up on their commitments. They were continuously sacrificing, longer term environmental and economic gains
Mhm.
for short term interests. So I really decided that if I'm getting older, I'm in my 50s by then, and I'm thinking if I and I want children, I have children of my own who are
Mhm.
growing up, and I think if I'm going to be serious about using my time and resources to address the climate crisis, which is what I find I'm passionate about, then I'm going to have to look to the younger
Yeah,
generation.
yeah, yeah.
And so I thought, so the best place to start was I didn't quit my day job, but I started volunteering, going into schools, taking these short sort of climate related, how should I call it, modules,
Mhm.
different ways, looking at different ways to
Yeah,
engage kids. And I worked with science teachers and other people who were qualified,
yeah. Well
and
said.
we teamed up and created this what we called the Carbon Busters Club, because we focused a little bit on carbon and
Mhm.
busting carbon and easy wins for getting getting back on track in
Yeah,
terms of balancing out
very well said. But
environmental needs.
when I was reading about you, Laurel, I was fascinated to see that you talk about your 11-year-old self. How do you channel your 11-year-old self when writing for young readers?
Yeah, well, that's true. The oh well, no one's ever asked me that. Okay, you got so 11. Well, that was my happy place anyway. I
Hmm.
can still remember being sort of 10, 11, 12, and
Mm.
reading a book was the happy place that I
Correct.
loved to go to. Just
Yeah.
cut out the world, get into an adventure story. And I used to love adventure stories that have involved like the gang of people. I
Mm.
don't know if you ever had the Enid Blyton
Oh,
books, like
I
quite
grew up on
famous.
Enid Blyton. It was
Oh,
very
I love the
standard
famous
fare in
five
India.
because they were so courageous. I mean, they didn't always want to be courageous, but
Yeah.
they stepped up and they
The
went out
famous
and
five was something
what the
we grew up on.
and the mysteries and if it comes to channeling my 11-year-old self when I'm writing, the way to do that is because now that's more or less what I'm spending most of my mornings doing, writing
Mhm.
these books. I'm on the
Wow.
fourth book now,
Mm.
and I've I've just been trying to let the characters just be themselves. So
Mm.
I think the way to do it is to let them be 11. I've got to stay out of it. I've got to I've created characters. They've got
Mm.
some fabulous flaws. They're very lovable. Even the not so nice ones are very lovable in their own way. And
Mm.
I've got to let them go out, get their big ideas, fail spectacularly if necessary, but
Yeah.
sometimes succeed. And, succeed in ways that surprise them, surprise the reader, and sometimes even surprise me.
Mm.
So big victories, but also
Yeah.
massive failures, and let them argue among themselves and mess up. And
That's
maybe the best way of describing it would be if my character, maybe to sort of, I should be sort of somehow see myself lying on the floor looking up at them, rather than see myself like an eye of God narrator who's somehow bringing all my adult baggage and my cynicism and this kind of eye of God overview. Rather just be down below looking up and
yeah.
let them play and
Well,
let them do what they need to do, and then eventually a novel emerges.
amazing.
That's
But
what I'm finding.
tell me, why did you choose science fantasy as your genre to convey your climate message?
Yeah, that's actually a question that I do get a lot because it doesn't really make sense if you look at it. And I'm telling people
Mm.
that the world of my books, I have one here. I don't know if it's going to come up
Yeah,
on the, maybe not.
I can see it. Night something. Yeah.
Knights Unite.
Hmm.
Yeah. Uh, so the world of the books is not a world building exercise over there. So I
Mm.
haven't, it's a version of today's reality with today's problems. But how do you make climate change or extreme weather attacks, or the thing
Mm.
I'm shining light on, which is related to overconsumption and related to the way we treat our environment?
Mm.
I wanted to bring up that as the bad guy in the story. And it took me some years actually. How can I have a realism? So I want a magical realism. I want a fantastical overlay, which
Mm.
is these monsters. So I've basically created these
Yeah.
monsters,
Mm.
and they are the demonification, personification, if you like,
Mm.
of the climate crisis, of the extreme weather. They can show up as wildfires, fierce gales, killer storms. They show up at sea
Mm.
as sea, the killer sea beasts. So it's a personification or demonification of extreme weather.
Hmm.
So I wanted to hit the kids through their imagination for
Very
that
interesting.
scary bit.
Very interesting.
Does it
But
make sense? Yeah.
absolutely. But tell me, how do you strike a balance between entertainment and education in your stories?
Well, I hope that I do, but it has to be done invisibly.
Yeah,
So if any child 11 plus hears that their story is educational, they're going to run a mile from it
correct.
and never look back.
Hmm.
So the idea is to lead with the entertainment and pretty much stick with the entertainment.
Hmm.
So it very important to grab. So I'm trying to write a fast-paced adventure, page-turning action, and then have the maybe not lessons, maybe lessons is the wrong word. There are lots of scenes in my book that could easily springboard into a classroom and into a
Hmm.
science lesson or a drama lesson or something around social studies where we're looking at human
Hmm.
behavior. But the stories themselves are entertainment. So I want to work at that intersection, entertainment and education. But
Interesting.
first and foremost, I want to entertain. And I think that any child who reads one of my novels and is entertained and at the end of it closes the book and goes away, it's still something. I got them reading, right?
Absolutely. But what are some of the misconceptions about climate change that you try and address through your writing?
Well, I think misconceptions. Well, there are so many, depending on a child's background or where they live.
Hmm.
They might be told by the grown-ups in their community that climate change is a myth. It
Correct.
doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So that's maybe the largest elephant in the room if you're
Hmm.
starting off with climate change as your bad guy.
Hmm.
But there's also maybe one of the misconceptions is that children can't be part of the solution.
Hmm.
And I would say the opposite, that there's so much that children can do in influencing the grown-ups in their life, and also thinking big and staying hopeful, and taking a solutions-based approach.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and that's what you see my characters doing.
Hmm.
It's all can do. They're at the front lines, and usually they leave the mentors and the teachers in my stories behind,
Fascinating.
and they're out
Fascinating.
there,
Absolutely.
having an impact.
Yeah. But Laurel, do you think young readers are more open to climate messages than adults? Why or why not?
Okay, absolutely, 100% more open.
Hmm.
Um, and going back to what I said earlier, that adults have a lot on their minds besides saving the world.
Hmm.
Uh, it's also that children, they recognize the urgency immediately, and if you start putting these problems in front of them, talking about deforestation in
Hmm.
the Amazon, and we see, areas the size of football fields disappearing every second, and you tell them about it, that they see the urgency. We have to work on this immediately, and we need big ideas, and we need to fix this in a way that a grown up is like, yeah, well, we're cynical. There's so many bad things happening. What can we do? Kids are not like that in my experience,
Hmm.
at least in the countries where I've worked.
Hmm.
What
Hmm.
do you think? It's
Absolutely. No,
do
I
you have
agree with
kids?
you. You know,
Yeah.
I think children are far more receptive to ideas on climate change than people of my generation. And I'm a boomer, so
You
uh,
don't look like one.
oh, well, I'm
Uh,
68. But moving on,
Well, can I just say,
no,
Ashutosh, can I say that also maybe the thing with the target age that I've gone for, 9 to 12, is that they still recognize the magic in nature as well.
hmm,
They still feel drawn to nature's magic
hmm,
in a way that as you get into your teenage years, you don't. And maybe that helps them connect with the problem and want to really go
hmm,
deep into trying to fix it.
fascinating. In your view, how can technology help children better understand and engage with climate science?
Okay, well, I haven't done too much of this because I've been trying to bring. Actually, we were talking before we went live. We were talking about how one of the ideas with writing these books and not writing screenplays but writing novels was to try to get kids away from their phones and back into reading and back into literacy. Because during the pandemic, most countries in the world saw a real dip in kids' reading levels,
Hmm,
the US in particular.
hmm, Mm.
And so, literacy is my goal. However, back to another earlier point about needing to engage children if you want them to learn anything or think about anything.
Mm.
The only real way to engage kids is to find a way to wow them or, grab them. Anything that technology can do to inspire awe or to get kids motivated and active
Mm.
is going to be good. So it can be, with storytelling, for example, they can be converted into mini games, short stories or pieces converted
Mm.
into games or
Mm.
converted into augmented reality
Yeah.
examples, like the stories where you're still safe in you're safe behind your mask, but you can experience
Correct.
big issues or nature up close. It's
Mm.
it's all got to be good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. You also have a Carbon Busters Club. Tell me about this club and how does it bring science and storytelling together for children?
Well, actually, it began as science. So I alluded to this a bit earlier,
Mm.
Ashutosh, that I wanted to get into the classroom and start to reach kids and,
Mm.
tell them that there was a problem and prepare them because, as I said, the grown-up world is not doing enough and it's
Mm.
all going to be on them. This upcoming generation, so much is going to be
Yeah.
expected of them. So I wanted to get into the classroom and I gathered science teachers around me, and we started with science. But as we went on, we created different modules. We ended up, actually, I was working in Greece then, and we ended up working with the Ministry of Education to develop actual programs.
Mhm.
But one thing that I found as we went on and on was that creating little characters and little role plays and little stories was the
Mm.
best way to engage.
Mm.
So the storytelling grew from that. And now, actually, the clubs are in hiatus as I seek for new funding rounds, and I'm focused more on the books.
Mhm.
Uh, and actually, I'm hoping to, as book sales grow, I'm hoping to be able to put my own money into the clubs and not have to rely on funding because then I can just get on with it.
Absolutely.
But sorry, I don't know if I answered your question, but basically,
No,
the
you did.
storytelling
Yeah,
grew out of the science,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it made it more accessible.
Absolutely. When we started, you also told me that you are doing a little bit of work in the area of gamification as well. And my question is, what role do you think gamification or augmented reality could play in storytelling for sustainability?
Well, yeah, I think we touched on this a bit earlier. So creating a game, obviously, if a child is having fun,
Yeah,
then that's more or less like putting the drawbridge down to engagement. If it's fun, it
correct.
should be a bit funny, it's interactive, a little bit competitive. Then, the rest is easy in terms of, I don't mean pushing messages, but,
Mm.
making facts and information
Yeah.
available,
Mm.
making it fun. So I'm developing now on the side a board game. However, because
Mhm.
board games, I mean, people are saying everywhere that there's a new dawn for board games. People want this kind of
Mm.
more old world feeling of sitting around the table.
Yeah,
But my idea is, and I'm living in Finland, which is the mecca of gaming and
yeah.
online gaming. So
Mm.
I'm very lucky. So I've got a team that I've started talking to
Mm.
for if just don't laugh, but this idea of a hybrid game where you actually
Mhm.
have a board game and real cards and
Yeah,
counters,
yeah.
but you have the chance to use your phone
Mm.
or other devices for extra content or for having remote players
Yeah.
come in, different kinds of
Mm.
ideas so that
Mm.
you have
Mm.
both. You have the technology and the sort of lovely old world feeling of a board
Correct,
game.
correct,
Yeah.
correct. And therefore, a follow-up question for you on this technology is how can authors like you and others use digital tools or platforms to take to make climate education more immersive?
Well, this is a really good question for me because I'm not yet doing enough, but I'm
Hmm.
thinking about it a lot.
Hmm.
I worked in technology corporations for many years. I worked for Nokia. I saw how, we started developing platforms, uh, online gaming platforms in the 2000s.
Hmm.
So one idea that just to make the point of the kind of thing I would like to do, but haven't and it's still evolving, is in my novels. So take something from the novel and see if you can convert that into a game or into an activity. So in my novels, when the children come to this secret school where the action happens, it's a kind of secret school for the world's top eco kids. Everyone is assigned a tree, kind of baby tree, from the nursery, and it's a tree that goes with their personality, and which they have to go off around the island, because the action takes place on this kind of secretive island, a little bit like an Arthurian Avalon that's shrouded in mist. They go and they plant their tree, and that tree becomes almost like an extension of them. It's like their best friend at school in nature. And they're given a type of tree which really fits their character and which grows together with them. So I've been slowly developing an app that readers could use to find their own tree, if that makes sense.
Very interesting.
So putting in their personalities, what do they like, answering questions, and eventually getting back a tree, which they could then actually, with their parents, even go out and get a seedling or a small sapling.
Absolutely.
And go and plant.
And, grow
in
your
the
own
real
tree
world.
as you grow and keep on learning more about climate change. Brilliant idea.
Yeah.
Laurel, I have time for 2 more questions for you. How do you ensure that both the message and the medium remain age appropriate and engaging?
Yeah, which is so important, because actually my Finnish husband, is always telling me, don't become Auntie Laurel sitting there in the corner preaching and, telling children this is how you have to be. So I think it comes back to this earlier question about the 11-year-old self. I have to make sure that I stay the heck out of the action myself, and let the characters be themselves and be 11.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I think a lot of adults need to start thinking of themselves as 11-year-olds to be able
I know.
to with this younger
That is
generation.
so well said. Yeah. Because we need to think big and have crazy ideas. Some of them aren't going to fly.
Absolutely.
But I think that's what where we've come to now with the crisis, that we need some really big ideas and some brave moves.
Correct. And my last question for you, Laurel. What do you hope children take away from your books, not just about the environment, but also about themselves?
All right. So for a big finish, I would have to say any child reading my book should get a feeling as they read that not only that the characters are their friends, and that they should be able to see a part of themselves in the characters, and they should also see differences, characters that are different to them. They should be able to get inside the head of my characters and feel like they're not alone. They should feel, welcome and sort of wrapped up in my stories. It can be a place where they can feel empowered themselves. When they see my kids taking action after they close the book, I want them to feel like they matter as well, and their actions matter, and they can go away and do something themselves that's going to be important, and going to approach a problem in the same way that my characters do. So that's my hope. That's the takeaway.
Well said. And on that note, Laurel, I just want to say, what an amazing conversation I've had with you. As I was talking to you, I've often said that people who are working towards educating children on climate change are doing such an amazing job, because I believe people of my generation have really messed up this world. And it's the future of the young, and well, both of us. But the young people are beginning to understand how challenging the issues of climate change are, and they're beginning to address this. Thank you again for talking to me about climate change, about your books, and about all the amazing work that you're doing as a writer. Thank you, and good luck.
Thank you. I really appreciate the chance to talk to you. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.